Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Uptrend. Great to have you all. Happy Friday, happy Chinese New Year's Eve, happy all of the things. And welcome to Drew. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We've got a great little crew of email geeks here, and I'm really excited to jump into this topic, which truly was inspired by real life events. So we have so many of our customers at Inbox Monster who are running these awesome email channels, and then they're getting other things added onto their plate, whether it be, hey, also do SMS, or you should figure out push notifications, or what should our in-app messaging be? All these other channels. And so, as if it weren't complicated enough, now we're sort of adding these other variables in and trying to figure out how to do email plus another channel. So I wanted to bring Drew on because he has a great and unique perspective on this, and just really get into it and have a conversation about how we can pull these things off. So just by way of introduction, I'm Laura. I run all of our branding and our marketing efforts here at Inbox Monster. We're an email signals platform. We do a lot of great things with creative projects, deliverability, SMS, and it's a great place to be. Very happy to be here. And Drew, please introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah, I'm Drew Price. I'm a Lifecycle marketing advisor these days, but I used to lead programs at Grammarly, IGN.com, the Home Depot, so several industries, and excited to be here.
And I will tell you that Drew's Grammarly emails have been in my swipe files for years as the example of great lifecycle communications that are data-driven, they're delightful, they're motivating, they're just the best. So they have been my favorite examples that I've kept squirreled away for years. So it makes it very exciting for me to chat with you.
That's delightful to hear. I'm glad you made it. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm a grammar nerd too, so that's great. So yes, just wanted to give a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today and what we hope you all get out of this. First, we're going to talk about the why, which Drew has underlined the importance of understanding what your why is in your program and understanding your audience. And then we have these three different sort of frameworks that we want to touch on. And we hope that you'll walk away with something practical that you can say, okay, here is a starting point for each of these three elements: channel, frequency, and the segment. All three can be befuddling on their own. So we're going to try to kind of simplify it into some really easy ways for you to wrap your head around these different elements. And then we're going to try to save time for questions at the end. We set this for 45 minutes, but we're happy to stay a little bit longer, chat and ask questions. And speaking of that, please do not wait until the end to ask questions. So if you want to shout us out right now and tell us hello, where you're from, where you're joining from, please do so. Chat throughout, and we'll just make this a conversation. And you could choose to chat publicly in a little chat over on the right-hand side. Hello to Thomas, by the way. So let's just get this going. So we talked about understanding the why. I'm sure everyone has seen a slide like this. Hey, Tara. Everyone's seen a slide like this, where you see this life cycle that you're trying to define for your audience. And maybe there's different buckets you're trying to attract, and then you're trying to convert, and then you're trying to nurture. And then there's a line that goes back to the beginning. This is a kind of an old school way of thinking about it, but it's a starting point. What do you think?
Yeah, I would just add, you teed it up really well at the beginning, where a lot of us have mature email programs unless we're a very early stage startup and we're looking to add channels. If we're going to make those investments, kind of before we get to this mature state where we create a machine that we then have to maintain and manage and optimize, it creates a lot of work. It's really, really important to kind of get to the first principles of what is the business impact that we feel like SMS or push can add? What's the value that we can add to our customers and therefore the business? We're kind of beyond the era of just driving opens and clicks There's some exceptions there. Like if you're a media company, sending traffic might be your main KPI. But long story short, be really crystal clear on the why before you start building, because as we all know, once you build it, you've got to maintain it. And even if you automate it, there's still a lot of work involved with maintenance. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Absolutely. And I will, make a little confession that I'm kind of on this journey myself. This slide looks absolutely nuts, but we're trying to get to really what are those important points where we need to communicate with our customers at Inbox Monsters. So we've done all this research and we've mapped it out into this wild customer journey that you see here, and then tried to zoom in even on, this is just kind of the first stage of the buying cycle where they're just discovering who we are. How do we need to communicate with them at different points, and how does that change for different individuals and different segments? It's we're at like a baby step on the journey, but asking you, Drew, what would I do next once I've gotten to this point of like, okay, I see what people need. What's my next step here?
Yeah. So, I think basically at this stage, you're at the hypothesis stage, and you may have a few hypotheses, in which case going into kind of an experimental mindset. So for instance, if you're going to stand up an SMS program, do you have one great idea that you think scales, or do you have multiple ideas that you're, not sure which one is the best? Well, you can launch, depending on your audience size, maybe cohorts, maybe A/B test these over a certain period of time longitudinally. So I would just say, if needed, hedge your bets, have holdback groups, do that kind of stuff. But make sure you're very refined, regardless of that, on the principled why, so that you're putting your best foot forward. Because you only get one chance at a first impression, so that's something you have to be mindful of as well. Hedge those bets.
Absolutely. You all didn't know that this was just a therapy session for me. I'm kidding, but those are all great ideas. So I think knowing the why is really important. There's also a little bit of the how. And, we've all heard this phrase, if we've been around in marketing or been around in email for a while, it's kind of this promise that has been made of being able to send the right message to the right person at the right time. But for me, I'm curious to know how you feel. It has always felt impossible to do that, or even just like an aspiration, but not a reality. What's your take on that?
I agree. I think this is a good real talk moment where we've been saying this for 10 years, maybe more, and personalization and right message, right person, right time. I'm sure for some of you, this might even show up in the description of your Lifecycle team or your email team, or however you describe it. But in reality, even if you have dynamic content or you have segments, I'm not sure there are a ton of examples where the full program honors this over the long haul. That being said, I think it's good to be aspirational and to build towards that mission. And it's okay if you fall a little bit short. But as we've spoken about, Laura, technology is getting better, enabling this. So it's a combination of, maybe your marketing automation platforms, maybe your data intelligence, and then obviously the strategy that you architect. I think some brands do this very well at certain points of the life cycle, but once again, it's really hard to do it well in every instance, beyond activation or beyond some kind of engagement program. That being said, I don't know that we have a better realistic alternative to march toward at the moment. I don't know, Laura, what do you think?
No, I think it's great to have an aspiration. And, as we were talking about, it does feel like finally a lot of the tooling is allowing for that ease with a customer to go back and forth between channels. Or in some of these cases, like we were just talking about tools, by no means is this an exhaustive list, but it's an interesting list of tools where you can say, actually, no, someone prefers just in-app messaging or just SMS communications for me. let me suppress them from everything else, or let me be able to go back and forth between channels pretty seamlessly. And it feels like, you know, the tools are finally getting there. So it's a good time to be aspirational, I guess, in this way.
And then one last thought I would add to that is, this might be controversial. Oh, someone from Nigeria. Hello.
That's so cool.
In terms of hierarchy in order of operations, to me, what's most important first and foremost is that you're optimizing for the right North Star KPIs. And then even if you're one to many in some situations, you're optimizing towards something that is actually helping the business, the bottom line. And this could be multiple metrics and include some qualitative metrics. But again, this is the aspiration I would say to maybe put next to this is make sure you're measuring success in a meaningful way that helps your business scale. Think kind of like a co-founder, not a traditional marketer.
Great point. Great point. Okay, we're going to have one little caveat. Actually, no, it's a big caveat at this moment, because I think this applies to everything with email. And it can be a little annoying, but it depends on your audience. So we're going to present some pretty practical ways of thinking about things and simplifying things. But I think you said the words experimental mindset. And that's what you have to have, because you never know what's going to work for your audience.
Yeah. CYA, you know, in context, right? Some of you are working for SaaS companies, B2B, B2C, traditional industries, media. There are so many, those are great inputs for deciding on what to build and how to design a program. So yeah, there's very little evergreen advice, but we can give frameworks and principles that should be relevant for everyone. And that's those are some of the takeaways we want to give today.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into the weeds. We have some frameworks and then some examples really for each of these sections. And by the way, I think it's so cool that we've got Nigeria and the Philippines represented. I'm so glad you guys joined. That's really cool. So first up is the channels. So this is a thorny one that, you know, if you're running a really mature email program and now you have all these other channels, how do you even think about this? So we started to think through just a few principles that you can use to put up against any decision you're going to make. And of course, one of the first ones that comes to mind is just that intrusiveness versus non-intrusiveness. And with email, you're not being as intrusive. You're allowing people to browse on their own time, maybe even in the tab they want to. With something like SMS, yes, you have a 95% open rate. That comes as a double-edged sword. So can you talk a little bit about that too, Drew?
Yeah, you said it beautifully. Those are the two examples I like to give as well because they're on opposing ends. But yeah, with email, we are choosing when to engage with our email clients. In general, there might be a few exceptions there. But with SMS, it's going to show up on that lock screen. It is pretty much impossible to ignore. So the open rate, like you mentioned, is as much correlation as it is causation. So something to be mindful with. And then also, obviously, risk of churning audiences comes with that kind of invasive lever. So yeah, I think it's really, really crucial that you understand that.
And if you're going to be invasive, I guess the next point is important. It better be something that's useful. It better be something that's immediate that really couldn't wait until later. And sometimes that's hard to decide. Is it useful to me or is it actually useful to the person I'm sending it to?
Yep. And we'll get into this a little bit, but you know, some examples of SMS programs that can get away with that and actually build trust would be, well, something was really important and I'm basically a partner with the brand. You told me something that I needed to know. Maybe it was transactional, but it's very, very important. Sometimes it's especially generational with like Gen Z and certain brands. It has to do with the creative execution. If it, as a brand, I love the product or service, but I also especially love the creative, the copywriting, the authenticity, the tone. Maybe I welcome those distractions, and it's actually something I tell my friends about. So we kind of have to read the room on these situations and know what our strengths are in order to be successful.
Absolutely. That goes to kind of the novelty piece of you could just delight someone, and that could be an effective communication too. So thinking about, trying to put a framework on it, right? Of like, when do I send an email versus an SMS versus push? Here's just kind of an outline of some do's and don'ts and what it's best for. A starting point. If you're just like, oh, I don't even know where to go. So talk us through a few kind of choice examples here.
Yeah. So, and again, this is, oh, you're getting an echo.
Is it from me? Leandra? I think it's just for me. Okay. I'm going to take my headphones out. We'll see if it works. Excuse me.
Okay. Let's give that a try. And I'll give me more time to think about this one. I will say we kind of implied it, but in SMS and push, you're dealing with I'm coming in. Oh, thank you. SMS and push, you're dealing with a lot of the same strengths and risks. So for instance, for me, SMS and push can lend itself to short-term success, but harder to figure out, hey, what's a program I'm going to stand up for SMS and push that people are still going to want to engage in 2 to 3 years from now? I remember there was I forget the name of it, but like a astrology app where kind of a snarky tone, maybe someone can tell me in the chat because I'm forgetting it. And it had a real moment because of the novelty of it. People in the Grammarly office were sharing their daily readings with each other because it would sometimes be like dark humor. Do I think that's still happening now? No, not at that level, because I think it was a bit of a trend. So that's just something, again, to be mindful of. It doesn't mean don't stand up a program that, maybe it is a trend and it's only going to last for a finite amount of time. Take advantage of those conditions, and that's still being a steward for your business. Whereas email, because of it being more of a passive interaction, it lends itself a little bit more to maybe more forgiveness, a little more maturity and longitudinal opportunities, but you still have to be just as intentional with the design of your programs. At the end of the day, all of these things need to be adding and co-star. Thank you, Nicole. At the end of the day, all these things need to be adding value. Sometimes they come with more risks based on the channel, and that's really the point of this slide.
Absolutely. Can you all hear me better now? It seems normal to me. I think so, yes. So let's talk through some examples of some brands that are, I think, doing a really good job at nailing how to speak in each channel really well. And airlines in general, I think, are doing a pretty good job at choosing their channel, merging everything with an in-app experience, an in-person experience. And so I fly with Delta, so I have a lot of examples with Delta where I think it's being done really well. There's the year in review email that is just a delight. That's coming to my inbox, of course. That's the preferred channel for it, where it's very rich. I'm going to scroll through this long email. There's all of the transactional communications coming through email, coming through the app via push notification, all super important. And I think really well executed at the moment when I need them in the channel that I need them. And then there's, SMS that's kind of a customer service channel, also very effective when I need it. Mm-hmm. There's I don't get a lot of communications in between. Maybe it's the segment that I'm in. I find that to be good for me. It's based on a behavioral trigger. But curious to know your opinion. There could be an opportunity to speak to me more.
Yeah, I would love that challenge. So for instance, if I was lucky enough to work with Delta or another airline, and I'm actually curious to hear from the audience if anyone can think of an idea for what would a regular engagement that is not going to maybe be too risky for churn purposes or annoy people if they're not actively looking for booking their next trip. My sense is that they can identify segments that are maybe very active travelers and design programs for them, like the weekly or the a few times a month business traveler. Perhaps there's something meaningful there. But if you're going to launch a push or an SMS program for an airline, I think it's going to be really hard to thread the needle. That being said, I would love that challenge. And I'm curious if anybody, maybe there is a program out there from an airline that somebody receives regular messages when they're not actively looking that they think does a good job. And it's more than just a flash sale. But this is one of those things going back to the point of context and, your particular business where it depends. I'm not seeing anything yet. Journey. Transactional really. The loyalty program does feel a little bit like kind of the backbone of most airlines, and understandably, vacation traveler.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Beth about the vacation traveler too. Like, I'm open to inspiration. I'm open to go anywhere. And there have been some airlines, like I remember Virgin, when I first flew with them afterwards, just giving me these totally inspirational messages about where to go next. So, there's an argument there.
Yeah, that's a great example. And then I have one I'll just spitball, which is, I think less is more. And it's kind of like in product updates. If you have a really meaningful product update, I think Delta does this, they'll let you know. And they had a controversial update to their awards program last year that had some backlash. But something that comes to mind for me is all these airlines, I think Virgin was one of the pioneers, have the safety video and they keep redoing it. But I wonder if you could get involvement, have your customers vote on the next concept rather than just showing up, and sometimes it's a hit and sometimes it feels like a big miss. But that's one way that I could see it working, is get involved with product development. Let the customers make some decision. Maybe a poll for choosing the uniforms when the uniforms go through a change, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. There's a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on when less is more. And when to not engage with customers. And we're going to talk a little bit about frequency. And actually, it's probably a good transition moment for us, Nicole, because we're going to get to that, I believe, next. I did want to show one more example before we talk about frequency, where, really, I think this brand is listening to its customers. And y'all will laugh if you came to Monster Bash in Atlanta, which is our event, because I dressed up as a Hot Topic person. So of course, this is my example. But just reading up on case studies with them, getting their emails, having gotten a lot of them after buying my costume last Halloween, I can say they do a really good job of, if you prefer the SMS channel, that is how they're going to communicate with you. And they're going to lead with brand and be very voice forward and very funny. And if not, you get that kind of traditional lifestyle type of really beautiful email campaigns. And so they're really letting their audience tell them what they want. And I think they're doing a really good job of it. So wanted to throw that example out too.
It's a great example. And I think it's getting into part of Nicole's question. There, again, no evergreen rules. This all depends. There are some times where it's quality over quantity. I mean, ideally, even when it's quantity, it's quantity. But there are certain situations where maybe it's because of the audience, maybe because it's the business. We have another example later where it doesn't lend itself to frequent mailing. I'll name another brand that a lot of us, if not all of us, are aware of, MailChimp. I didn't used to get a lot of announcements from MailChimp. And whenever I did, though, I would pay attention because it always felt super intentional and for me, or at least very brand forward. And so I think that's a consideration. Now, if you're retail or e-commerce, food delivery, it's just a different animal, and frequency becomes a part of the situation. And so Hot Topic, if they only sent me an email once a quarter, they'd be leaving so much opportunity on the table, and it just wouldn't make sense. So when they do it, at least their copy is, like the MMS message example, it's speaking to their demographic.
Sure. And retail, I probably would just venture to say as a whole, there's more opportunity for communication. There's a higher threshold for communication, all of those things.
So many SKUs, so many different products to promote.
Exactly. And so this is a perfect transition to talk really more about frequency. And I think a super simple way of thinking about this that is very smart, that Drew, I know you kind of put together.
Yeah, so this is meant to be simple, intentionally, kind of like a napkin version of something for a gut check. A lot of people will ask questions like, how often should I communicate? Or how many messages to send during an onboarding moment, that kind of stuff. Again, it depends. But one way I like to break this down is to do it by segment, and then to kind of have 2 columns, one ranking for impact, meaning impact to your business, and then one ranking for tolerance. And we have a couple quick examples. I like to use Airbnb for this because they have multiple audience. So for this one, we're going to first talk about hosts. And let's just say it's a new host. Someone has an investment property. They want to leverage Airbnb for short-term rentals. In this case, you are true partners. It's essentially a rev share model. You, the host, and Airbnb both make money when you are successful. So you have a true partnership. And because of that, the business impact and the tolerance rank are at parity. So for instance, completing a profile, that's a must-have. I'm not going to get any bookings until I have a profile, until I have a home on Airbnb and I have availability all filled out on the calendar. My tolerance for you, like if I abandon that step during signup, I should have a pretty high tolerance for you giving me nudge messages saying, hey, Drew, come back, finish your profile. Like we can't pay, you can't book anything until you do that. So that's the intention there, just to give you one of the examples. I won't necessarily go through every cell, but again, point here is you have a true partnership. There should be a high tolerance just like built in there, but there are still business metrics that maybe are more like nice to haves and not must haves. Improving your profile. Well, Airbnb knows that the quality of your photos, the quality of your description is super important. They famously have paid in the past for photographers to go to certain do photos for free for listings to improve the profile. So similarly, you don't necessarily want to over message for that. That's why we moved it to a 2. And then similarly, finally, for reviewing guests. We could all scrutinize where these things fall. It's not important that you agree with me or Laura on where we plotted these numbers, more so that you just understand the idea behind this framework. And again, it's something you could do by yourself or with your team, just to kind of gut check your own assumptions about, are we over messaging around a particular KPI?
Love that. It's a back of the napkin whiteboard, easy to vote up, vote down things. And here's another example I think that makes it a little real as well, because many of us have been prospective guests in Airbnb and can kind of understand these actions as well.
Yeah, and so on this side, again, scrutinize the number of scores we gave, but wanted to, from a bird's eye view, show that because it's not the same partnership, there's not necessarily going to be that parity. There might be some things that Airbnb cares about a lot, but that you as a user of Airbnb or prospective user may not care about a lot. Like for instance, maybe you're highly skeptical of using Airbnb and you were just doing like a little bit of a exploratory research and comparing it to hotels or something else. You got to be a little bit more careful there. So creating a wish list, super meaningful KPI. not necessarily something I want to hear about weekly or daily, of course, from Airbnb. This is a moment in time. You got to be careful. Should you build like an abandonment flow? Yeah, probably. If someone starts to do that, or if they've been browsing and they didn't create a wish list, send some dynamic, relevant content of, are you planning a trip? Are you interested in these properties? Like, the CTA could be create a wish list, that kind of stuff. In the interest of time, I won't go into too much detail, but
sure. I was just going to say, like, I have a unique situation in that I'm a host at Airbnb. I'm definitely a guest. And so I've sort of gotten the gamut of communications from them that really do make this point. I was recently browsing to go to Tidy Island. I didn't create a wish list. I just fly by the seat of my pants as I'm doing it, but they did send me a very useful set of follow-up communications that fit the parameters I was looking for. It was very helpful. As a host, they have sent me many, many more communications, and maybe too many in this transactional SMS example where I haven't completed my profile, and they annoyed me every single day about it. So they maybe crossed the threshold for me, but it was it's very interesting to see this mindset does kind of come to play in their email program for sure. So yes, then let's talk about this kind of final parameter, which is also very complex, but we're going to try to boil it down to something that's useful, which is segmentation. And how in the world do you do it? Sometimes it feels very difficult to try to figure out who those distinct segments are, how you're going to message to them without losing your mind. And, first of all, just understanding that it is tricky. It's been even more tricky in email, as some of our traditional engagement metrics have meant less to us. And we've got to go all the way down to attribution at the end to really see anything meaningful. I think you have also brought up a really good point in our chats about product engagement versus email or whatever engagement. Maybe people just don't want to hear from you in certain channels. So you have to put on your listening ears everywhere and kind of go back to that idea of listening to your audience being true. And then lastly, just thinking about, what I would call overtly, asking someone what they want versus just observing their behavior. So there is a huge opportunity to have a direct conversation and say, hey, how do you want to hear from me? Am I serving you up the right content versus just listening and hoping that you're understanding? So there's a lot of things to think through here. I mean, anything to add?
Yeah, just the main thing for me would be on the column on the left, I highly recommend a matrix, especially if you have a large audience, of that product engagement versus channel engagement. It can be super illuminating. You basically get a risk reward for email. There might be some people that are weekly active users or daily active users that have a 0.9% open rate. What is that telling you? So, maybe in product messaging is the right channel, and you can test the waters with another channel, but most likely they are happy product users. They understand your offering. They don't necessarily need marketing's help to be in the hero state. But just in general, that can be a really nice, it doesn't have to be complex. It could be something like 3 columns, 3 rows, but more meaningful than just looking at email engagement and using that for things like deliverability or targeting insights.
Yes. And likely those are things that you have at your fingertips already too, if they're a little bit closer to your product or your service or whatever it is that you're offering. So that's a great point. Okay, so we have a little framework for this too. So can you talk us through what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is, you could go more complex or less complex, but this is an example of a matrix of basically, like, I'll tell you a real case study. With Grammarly back in like 2017, wanted to do deeper segmentation for our monthly seasonal promo program. So we came up with these segments again. So when did someone join? Time on file. Product activity. Have they used the product in the last week, the last month? Has there been no activity, etc. And then the email activity, preferred to use click versus open, but you could use both or one or the other. But when you start to pair all of these things together, you're going to get very different open rates and conversion rates for something, again, like a revenue-driven program, like a promo program. And what you might find is it's much easier to create that risk and reward. Like here is and you might get some surprises as well. So for instance, there were some cohorts for us, very low open rate, but there was a decent conversion rate of those openers. In fact, really, really high. So the takeaway there was we need to segment even deeper. What are some of the patterns of the people that converted that hadn't been opening emails that suddenly did just open an email versus those that did not? So this can kind of create like a bit of an onion that you got to peel back more and more. But it can also be helpful if you find a segment that is not high reward and it's high risk. Perhaps you suppress them moving forward and you need to design a new program just for them. That's also a kind of a practical tip.
Yes, I love the phrase. If you love them, let them go. Some people just, it's better off that way. You would much rather be speaking to a highly engaged, smaller group of people, I'm guessing, than a larger subset. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but that seems to be a more lucrative endeavor.
Totally.
Cool. Well, I do want to bring up an example, which kind of would be very hard to nail down in terms of segmentation. This is an example of a program that I worked on a long time ago. And these are all examples from my inbox. They're not anything special. But CarMax or any sort of online car buying, experience, the life cycle is about 7 years long. So, yes, it's a retail experience, but they're not going to buy again for 7 years. So are there some groups of people that do want to hear from you about maintenance and things about their car? Are there some people who just don't want to hear from you anymore? Obviously there's a lot you can do when people are in the buying cycle. But then what happens afterwards? So this is just an example, I think, of really tricky segmentation. How would you approach this?
With great power comes great responsibility. I think what's great about buying a car or something along those lines is it kind of has those built-in guardrails around, maintenance. Oh, well, based on which car you got, what is the average time before you need the tires to be replaced and that kind of thing, maintenance.
Sure.
So I think here it kind of goes back to that. Be careful not to over communicate, but also take advantage of that built-in life cycle. Similar if you're planning a wedding or, as a couple or you're pregnant, that kind of stuff. These built-in finite life cycles can be a dream to architect around, but you need to be personalized and dynamic to get the most out of it. And then,
man, those are some of those, your baby's the size of a melon emails. Those are the most effective and probably the highest opened emails ever. Gotta say, it's a defined life cycle.
Exactly. And then, Laura, I saw 2 questions. One from, well, first of all, the slideshow should be available.
Yes. Right? Everyone who's registered will automatically get a recording of this. We'll include our beautiful faces as well as our slides. So that will be coming shortly after, just after it's processed. So yes, you all get this. You're welcome, Gabe. But I did see a question coming from Talia as well that I think is super important. How can we think about engagement data with iOS privacy restrictions? Yes, feel you on that. And I personally also, sending a lot of B2B communications, run into a lot of corporate filters as well that give me a false sense of engagement. And these are really important, stopgaps that companies have in place, but they can make it look like, oh, all my emails are getting opened and clicked by everyone. Everything's great. So, curious to hear Drew's thoughts on this, but obviously we've just got to go further down the funnel to think about what's actually having an impact. And it kind of all goes back to the beginning of this conversation of, defining what's the business impact. And that's probably not going to be your open rate, or even your click-through rate. It's going to be something else.
Yep. Well said. So I prefer to look at this half glass full, which is, yes, the open rate and the click rate are less reliable these days. We talk about the click rate as well, where you get automated clicks with certain clients. It just automatically clicks everything, especially if you're a big volume sender. So both of these are secondary important proxy metrics these days. They're not precise. We have to know that. And it's unfortunate that in many cases they're inflated, but maybe with the iOS privacy situation, it might go the other way. It might just anonymize. Regardless, I would say what Laura said, those deeper business metrics is what you should be optimizing for, and then use these open and click metrics for proxies and sometimes for experimentation, although I would still defer to business metrics as the standard. And then also it's why it's that much more important to be looking at real inboxing data, feedback, plug for Inbox Monster, where you can optimize for that. Like what's more important to me, managing a program would be, are we inboxing at 100% at Gmail or not? And then whether or not it's truly a 25% open rate or 15% or a 40% is less critical to me as, am I targeting the right people and not targeting, not over communicating? And is my reputation in a scalable, steady state?
Yes, and since you did it and I didn't, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about those additional signals that you can get. And really, we've sort of built a platform to try to give people those signals to say, yes, I'm doing a good job, or no, I'm not. Monitoring your inboxing rates, monitoring your complaint rates, things like that can give us those feedback loops on, are we over communicating? Are we segmenting in the right way? Especially in the absence of some of those other metrics. So it's super important. And, just to note that we also have added SMS tools to our tool set, and that has traditionally been really hard to get feedback on. And, you would just kind of pray or look at sales and say, well, I think this SMS was effective. But we're actually able to show, if you're landing with different carriers in the US and Canada, with some of these SMS tools that are in beta now. So it's a pretty cool feedback loop, and using every single signal that you can to understand if you're doing a good job is just so important.
Yep. And one way to think about how that's actionable outside of obviously just managing your deliverability and creating a mode for that is your numerator and your denominator. We talked about business metrics. Your let's just say it's revenue or purchases or something like that. That becomes your numerator for a given campaign. Let's just say you sent to 1,000 people at Gmail. If inboxing was at 100%, you can, while it's, like a proxy to a degree, you can just say, okay, well, the 1,000 is my denominator. How many conversions did I get? And you can start to look at things beyond the open rate and beyond the click rate, and more of a true conversion rate of how many people did I send to? How many did actually convert?
Absolutely. Well, okay, we did say we would keep it around 45 minutes, and we are right at time, which was beautiful. Never happens, I will say. So thank you for an awesome conversation. If there are any other questions, I feel like we got to really chat throughout, which was great. Are there any other questions from the crowd? We can stay on for just a moment longer if you have any burning questions. I was very meta with my screenshot from our tool from our webinar of us talking.
It is Friday, so as far as I'm concerned, everyone can take the rest of the day off. And
you just give us permission to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Well, and I appreciate everyone's questions throughout. It's always fun to sort of think in this way and think in a high level in this way. So thanks to everyone. And we will be sending out the recording, so you will all automatically get that. But thanks for spending time with us.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And have a great rest of your day off. Thanks.